We left on the 28th of June. We returned on the 27th of August. We traveled 5,640 miles. We flew for 71 hours, and we burnt 1,050 gallons of gas. What happened in between, I guess, is the story.
I want to talk about Nothing by Chance. And I don't care if you're a pilot or not, that's just a damn cool title for a book. And a damn cool voice, too. And it belongs to my friend Brian Shepard, better known by the call sign Biggles. And he's about to tell you the rest of the story. One that continues another great tale first lived and told by the famed writer Richard Bach. It's a modern-day biplane adventure that continues where he and Spence Nelson left off 50 years ago. And Biggles has an amazing story, even for a guy who owns said biplane and holds two platinum records from my all-time favorite band. And a couple more, but who's counting? But he's a little bit coy about the recording part of the story. And if you're intrigued, I'll tell you what, let's petition for him to come back and tell us all about that too. But for now, he's happy to share his living proof that Nothing by Chance is real, and to a degree that you won't believe. They say everything happens for a reason. And I don't know who they are, but if you ask me, they're right. It's something that holds true just again and again. And no matter what your religious beliefs are, sometimes it's just uncanny how things go, isn't it? But if you're an aviator of any kind, you know Richard Bach said it best. And I know Biggles agrees. And that's because he's lived it. Like, really lived it, biplane and all. And I'm not being metaphorical. His biplane, the very one I'm about to tell you about, is actually in the book Nothing by Chance. And if you're familiar with the book, Nothing by Chance is one of the all-time great aviation books. Top 5 for sure, and maybe even number 1 for many of you. And it's by the great author Richard Bach, who also authored Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Perhaps you've heard of it. First published in 1969, the story follows the author on a biplane adventure throughout the Midwest United States, making a living day to day, town to town, and in a time gone by that we'll never see again. Or will we? Because just last year, the Great American Biplane Tour barnstormed its way across the Midwest, just like in the book, and the adventure ultimately ended in Oshkosh, a fitting end to any aviation adventure if you ask me. And amongst the historical biplanes making the journey was a very special one, a biplane named Olive. And even for a historical biplane, Olive has quite a story. Let's read from the book. Nothing by Chance, Richard Bach, Chapter 16. Hey, look, Dick, a biplane. It came small and quiet, whispering in from the west, easing down toward us through the sky. Stu, that's a Traveler. That's Spencer Nelson. He made it. It was a bomb set off in our midst. I leapt into the cockpit and tossed the starting crank to Stu. You don't mind waiting a minute, folks, do you? I said to the man and his sons. This other airplane is in all the way from California. I'll go up and welcome him in, and then we'll fly. And they didn't have a chance to protest. The engine, screaming from the inertia starter, burst into life, and we were taxiing at once, gathering speed, lifting off the ground, turning toward the newcomer. He was swinging into the landing pattern when we caught him, and closed into formation alongside. The pilot waved. Hey, Spence, I shouted, knowing he couldn't hear a word over the wind. This airplane was beautiful. It was just out of the shop, finished by this airline captain who couldn't get enough of flying. The machine shined and sparkled and flashed in the sunlight. There wasn't a single patch, not one oil streak or spot of grease down its whole length, and I blinked at its perfection. The big air-balanced rudder touched over, and we turned for a low pass along the grass runway. Travel Air Aircraft Company went the smooth, professional letters on the tail, Wichita, Kansas. The airplane was a sleek, eager dolphin in the sky, a much larger machine than the Parks, and much more elegant. We felt like a steamy, tar-stained little tugboat nosing the United States into harbor. I wonder if Spence knew what he was getting into, if his glossy blue airplane was going to look as pretty going home as it did this minute. We whistled once more through the pattern and landed, that queen of a biplane leading the way, taxiing into the passengers, shutting down into a stately silence. I had never met the pilot, and knew him only through letters and telephone calls as he struggled to get his airplane ready for the summer. When he took off his helmet and climbed down from the high cockpit, I saw that Spencer Nelson was a short, quick man with a hawkish look of an old-time pilot, firm, angled face, intense blue eyes. Mr. Nelson, I said. Mr. Bach, I presume. Spence, you nutty guy, you made it. Where are you in from this morning? I'm in from Kearney, Nebraska, 5 hours flying. I called your house. Betty said you had called from here. He stretched, glad to be out of the cockpit. That old parachute gets kind of hard to sit on after a while, don't it? Well, from here on out, you're in the land of happy barnstorming, Spence. But you come out here to stand around and talk, or you want to do some work? We got passengers waiting. Let's go, he said. He piled a massive equipment from the front cockpit onto the ground and Stu-led two of the passengers to the big airplane. I helped the other one into the Parks, which was looking rattier every moment she stood alongside the travel air. Now, what the book doesn't say is how storied the history of that travel air biplane really was, even at the time. Spence was already the 21st owner, and a lot has happened since. She even got a new name, Olive.
Hi, Olive. Hello, boy.
No, not that Olive. This Olive. You see, Olive is a 1929 Travel Air B4000, nicknamed Olive first in honor of Olive Shepherd, who served as a sergeant in the British Army during World War II, but there are quite a few other Olives in her history that we're going to find out about. My friend Brian Shepherd, a.k.a. Biggles, and his wife Janine are the 25th owners of 9872. Olive has worked in 7 different states, from delivering mail and parcels to flying Civil Air Patrol, training Navy flyers. It's flown in a movie. It's labored as a crop duster and sometimes flown just for the fun of flying in an open cockpit biplane. The story starts on May 21st, 1929, when Olive was purchased by Oliver Parks for Parks Airlines in St. Louis, Missouri. The notary public for that purchase was named Olive Ann Meller. She worked as a bookkeeper at Travel Air and later went on to marry Walter Beach and later ran their company, Beach Aircraft. Parks Airlines was renamed Parks Air College Airlines, based at Curtis Steinberg Airport. Parks trained pilots and got an airmail contract, swapped stock with Mid-Continent Airlines, then Ozark bought him out. Ozark later merged with TWA. Now, in case you've lost track, we're up to owner number 4, which is Midwest Airways, owned by James, Ed, and Roy Knapp. They bought 9872 and brought it to Milwaukee County Airport, operated by Thomas Hamilton. Hamilton was the one who founded Hamilton Aero Manufacturing Company in Milwaukee and then later merged with Standard Steel to form the famous Hamilton Standard Propeller Company. The Knapp brothers were inducted into the Wisconsin Aviation Hall of Fame in 2014. Midwest did flight training, they did aerial photography, and air parcel service, and they serviced Lindbergh's plane, Wiley Post's plane, and taught the African explorer Frank Buck how to fly, and also turned out 3,000 military pilots for World War II. Owner number 7 saw the airplane move to Illinois. This pilot is the famous Herman Wilhelmi. Herman was an Eastern Airlines pilot known to tell air traffic control, "This is Herman the German. I'm coming in." Herman was always cleared direct, but then he spent time in each control tower everywhere he landed. Another Herman story, in a lengthy weather delay, he pulled out of the hold at Big Run, inbound for Chicago Midway. He landed at the airstrip on his own farm a few miles away, and had his wife feed the passengers. There were several versions of this tale online, and the outer marker for runway 4 right at Chicago Midway was named Herman. Owner number 8 came in 1939. Lewis Holy Name School of Aeronautics in Illinois, with Bishop Bernard Scheil at the helm of the school. The bishop was passionate about giving an opportunity for underprivileged boys to learn aviation. The U.S. Navy took over the campus during World War II, and hundreds of pilots received their training there. Now it's Lewis University and has a highly regarded Department of Aviation and Transportation Studies. 9872 then went on to Missouri to Civil Air Patrol work, to Dallas for the Garrett Flying Service, and then to California working for the Hemet Packing Company, east to Arizona for crop dusting work in Buckeye, then Loudermilk Aviation Company, who sold it to a guy named Sherman with a chattel mortgage for 5 aircraft and 3 pickup trucks. But now comes the fun part, and this is the part where nothing happens by chance. Owner number 21, 1965, an airline captain from San Diego, Spencer V. Nelson. He brought 9872 back to California. Spence, as many of his friends called him, had an awful lot of fun with his biplane. He even took leave from work and barnstormed around the country flying in Richard Bach's Great American Flying Circus in 1966. Following the film Nothing by Chance, along with San Diego's Stu McPherson, Canadian author Glenn Norman, Stephen W. Young, and of course, Richard Bach. Owners 22 through 24, well, it gets a little gray there, but let's just say it passed through 3 names in Santa Rosa pretty quickly, and none of them ever flew it, but allegedly one of them lost it to one of the others in a poker game. Talk about chance. Nowadays, Olive is based at McClellan Palomar Airport, where he's better known to air traffic controllers as Fun Flights 1, and flies passengers over coastal San Diego, North County. And if you're interested, you too can take a ride and a piece of history with Biggles at the controls. All the information's in the show notes. And speaking of chance, you know how sometimes the phone rings when you don't expect it?
We're thinking of 2018. Okay, this is going to be the first year without having to get up at 5 o'clock every morning. What are we going to do? Maybe we'll go to New Zealand. Maybe we'll go back to England for a trip, whatever. And then pretty much first week of the new year, phone rings and Janine gets a phone call. Janine, by the way, is my wife, who's the partner in crime for this little operation of ours called Fun Flights. We get a phone call from Rob Locke, who is also known as Waldo. And he, along with others, are organizing the American Barnstormer Tour for 2018. There's been half a dozen of these tours. And they pretty much reflect the whole period of the barnstorming period of 1920s. That's what they're trying to do. In fact, the American Barnstormers Tour, I think, was first established in 1922. And it was sort of brought to life by Richard Bach, the author of Jonathan Livingston Seagull and many other books. But more in particular, a book by the title of Nothing by Chance. So here we get this phone call. Would we be interested in coming out and joining the tour and giving rides on the tour? And I didn't take the call. Janine took the call, and she turned around and said, "We've been invited to go on the Barnstormers tour. What do you think?" "I think we should do it." And so I said, "Well, if you've made the decision, then we're doing it. Okay, this is good news." So we do everything together. So we said yes, and one of the best decisions was made. And it pretty much took most of 2018 off our hands, because with the planning to do it and what it was all about, what was it going to entail. We've never done anything like this before. I mean, I've been flying Travel Airs for 20 years, but I've never gone out of California with them. So this was, wow, okay, how are we going to do this? And it was a fantastic experience to be able to fly across America at about 1,500 feet AGL all the way, even over the high bits, and see this wonderful country of ours, being the Englishman that I am, was just wonderful. Fantastic experience. So, having said yes, we went into the whole planning of the whole thing. The team that was organizing the tour was just phenomenal. The tour itself was due to, or did, but the first date was going to be July the 5th, and it ran through till the end of Oshkosh. So July 5th, we were supposed to be in Jefferson City, and then after that, we were going to Ames, Iowa, then Watertown, South Dakota, Brainerd, Minnesota, and Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So the first mission was, okay, we got to get to Jefferson City. What do we do? Take the wings off, put it in a box and drive it there? Or no, we're going to fly it there. And then it turned out that there were 3 other aircraft coming from California to make up a total of 12. There were to be 12 Travel Airs on the tour. 5 of us were going to be given rides. The others were just beautiful static displays, but we would fly together to all these different airports. From California, it was Richard Zeiler, Pedro Langton, and Biplane Keith from Chino. And so meeting up with them was first part of the plan. So that we all agreed to meet in Flaybob at the beginning of June and get to know each other. So we had a day at Flaybob and talked about what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, and came away and started putting all our kit together, and then left here, Carlsbad, California, on the 28th of June to go back to Flaybob, where we all met up, and then we started out on the journey. So first off, we had the mission. So what was the mission of the first part of this? The mission was to fly to Jefferson City in Missouri, meet up with 11 other travel airs, and spend a month barnstorming through the Midwest. That was the mission. So the 4 aircraft from California, we left Flaybob on the morning of the 29th of June. And we went from Flaybob, we gassed up in Blythe, and then we overnighted in Casa Grande, Arizona. That was our first day. Pretty uneventful, other than the fact that Blythe's temperature at the time was 112 degrees. And getting from there to Casa Grande was interesting. Never flown a travel air in those kind of temperatures, and did not quite perform the same way as it does at sea level. Good old Carlsbad before we left, but did very well. No events there. It was just a really good day flying. 3 of us actually flew that first day. Richard in the Sun Siren joined us later. So the next day, Casa Grande, we went from Casa Grande to Cochise was our fuel stop, and then Las Cruces, New Mexico was our second night. And again, beautiful weather, completely uneventful, and everything's going fine. From there, on the next day, we decided we would go to Van Horn for a fuel stop, and we wanted to end up in Sweetwater, which was the Avenger Field, which is the Wasps' home port of call back in the 1940s. And having done some work with some of the wonderful Wasps, just wanted to go and land at that airfield and take a look at, see where they all trained back in 1942, 43. And this is where Nothing by Chance sort of started. So at Van Horn, we landed in Van Horn, and I was down to about 20 minutes, 30 minutes of fuel, and so I wasn't going to be going on anywhere from Van Horn unless I got some fuel. And we found out the pumps weren't working, and not only weren't the pumps working, but there was no one at the airfield. When 2 young lads pitched up in their truck and informed us that the airport manager had been relieved of his duties the week before, and that we were sort of, don't know what we're going to do. One of them decided he had a phone number he could call, and he made some calls, and within 20 minutes he'd been given codes to operate the machinery, and we got pumps working, we got fuel in the airplane. And one of them turned to us and said, "Well, where are you going next?" And we said, "We're off to Sweetwater." It was about 4 p.m. by now. And he turned around and said, "Well, we don't want anybody there. Sweetwater, they shut up at 4 o'clock, so there won't be anybody there." And then fortunately, the other young lad said, "But I happen to know the manager." So he phoned, and Bob, the manager at Sweetwater, was really kind. He stayed on and waited for us to land. We didn't get there till 6:30 at night. He waited for us. And then he allowed us to stay that night and put the airplanes actually in one of the old original Wasps hangars, which was pretty cool, just to be on that hallowed ground and walk around. From there, we went on the next day to Ranger Antique Airfield, where one of our other members of the tour was stationed. In fact, owns and runs the airport at Ranger, and we met up there with 2 other of the travel airs, and the Sun Siren. Richard joined us with the Sun Siren there. And we had a great afternoon. It was the first time I'd actually landed Olive on grass. So that was a pretty cool, and that's a memory that goes in. I mean, it wasn't my first grass landing by any means, but it was the first one in Olive. And boy, it was cool. It was cool. Landing a 1929 travel air on grass for the first time was pretty cool. So they were built to do that. From Sweetwater, we moved on and we went to Ardmore. And and Nothing by Chance came to work again for me there in Ardmore. So in Ardmore, we're landing. We've got a thunderstorm on the end of the runway. The wind is 90 degrees across the runway, and it's blowing pretty bad, and haven't really got any other options. The storm is pretty big. We're not going to be able to get around it, so got to get on the ground. And in doing that, I happened to clip a wing. So we land, we pull up, and the storm is now raging on the end of the runway, and it's starting to rain, and there's nobody there. It's like a deserted airfield. And we're thinking, oh, well, this is good. We've got 4 cloth airplanes out and a thunderstorm about to hit the airport. So if only we could find a hangar. No open hangars. We ran around that airport looking, there's nothing. And then suddenly, coming from one end of the airport is this old truck. Pop, 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 and he's coming down the taxiway. And there we're standing out on the apron. And he gets out of the truck and he said, "You need to get those girls in a hangar." And we said, yeah, if only we could find one, we would love to put the airplanes in a hangar. And he said, "I got one." And so we follow him. There's this old truck now going back down the taxiway. It is now raining, pretty heavy. And we're taxiing behind him back to his hangar. He opens this hangar and it's like brand spanking new, painted, heated. He has a fan going around made out of, I think it was helicopter blades. It was that big. And it was now dark, and we're thinking, okay, well, I just needed to do some cloth repairs to the airplane. What are we going to do? And he turns around and said, "Listen, it's yours. Stay here. You're in the dry. You're in the warm. I'll go get some food and have at it." So there we were, inside, watching the storm on the outside, which was now really hammering. And we were able to repair my little tear on the wing and get out of there the next morning. And it was one of those experiences that I don't think it would have happened in California. So you meet people on these trips. There's a different America out there to the one that we live in here, and it was very heartening. I have to tell you, very heartening. People were just absolutely wonderful. So from Ranger and Ardmore, we moved on up to Siloam Springs, and then the next day we ended up at Jefferson, and we got to Jefferson on the 4th of July. It was when we got there. We were asked to overfly the city with all the airplanes. Because by now at Jefferson, we were all there. Everybody else had come. 2 guys had come up from Florida. Other guys had come from Missouri, Minnesota. And we were all there at Jefferson on the 4th of July. And we were able to fly out over the town, fly over the parade, and it was great. So I wish you could see the chart. I'm actually looking at a map of our wonderful country, and with the lines that I've drawn on it to show the journey. And boy, that's a long way. It's a long way. 80 miles an hour and 1,500 feet AGL. That's sort of rather pleased that I've done it, I have to tell you, because it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing for me to do that.
How many days did it take?
So we were asked to be there on the 4th of July. We could have actually got in there on the 3rd, so that would have made it 6 days. So we held off actually at one night at Siloam Springs, and then flew in there on the 4th. And then the tour started the next day. The tour was just fantastic. I mean, people were turning up. I mentioned the airports, so Jefferson, Ames, Watertown, Brainerd, and Eau Claire. People would turn up at 8 o'clock in the morning and stand in line for rides. I mean, the tour, actually, the 5 of us doing rides gave 2,000 passenger rides in the month of July, which was just phenomenal, just incredible. I'd like to say we flew everybody. I have a feeling that we weren't able to fly everybody. But enthusiasm for coming out and taking a biplane ride was just everything that I'd read in Richard Bach's books and other books on barnstorming. This is what happens. People just turn up. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people every day. It was incredible. 3 days at each of the airports, and there was never a lull. There was never a lull. And if it rained, and then people just hung around and waited for the rain to stop. And then as soon as the rain stopped, off we went again. So we got to Watertown, South Dakota, and I'd been given rides for 2 days there and decided to do an oil change. And I'll never know why I decided to do the oil change there. This is another nothing by chance moment. At the time I was 46 hours out of a 50. In my head, I was going to do the oil change in Brainerd. But pushing the aircraft back into the hangar on that second night at Watertown, John Youst, who runs that place there, was doing an oil change on another airplane and says, hey, you mentioned earlier you were thinking about an oil change. I'm here. And I said, you are? Could you do another one? And he said, oh, no problem. So went ahead and did an oil change. Came in the next morning and found John Youst sitting by the airplane saying, I think I need to show you something. So, oh dear, don't you hate that when a mechanic says, I think I need to show you something. And I was making metal. So decided, okay, engine's making metal. It was in the filter. And that's the end of my tour. And so we told them, that's it, we're done. We hoped that maybe someone could come out and look at the airplane and tell us, oh, no, it's not really a problem. We can get this fixed in 24 hours. You can be back up. But in my heart, I knew I couldn't, and knew that there was something drastically wrong with the engine. So that was it. But and everyone has asked me ever since, so what made you decide to do the oil change? Did you notice something was wrong with the engine? Was it not producing power? I said, you have no clue. The engine was not telling me anything. Temps, pressures, everything was absolutely fine. There was not a hint that there was anything wrong with the engine, other than when we cut the oil filter and we found that there was. Now, I happen to know there was no metal in it before because we did an oil change on the airplane just before we left. So whatever happened on our journey to Watertown. So that was pretty gut-wrenching because, you spent all this year planning to get there and do this whole tour, and here we are halfway through the tour and we're pulling out. And it's pretty clear to me that the engine is going to have to come off the airplane, and I got to get it somewhere and get someone to take a look at it and tell me exactly what we have to do here. And in my 20 years of flying over here, I've never made it to Oshkosh. So that was also part of the whole thing. Well, the tour is going to end up in Oshkosh. So, this is that. I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. I can cross this off the bucket list. I've barnstormed. And I got to Oshkosh. And now we're not going to get to Oshkosh because the plane's stuck in South Dakota and there's no way I can get to Oshkosh. Managed to get put in touch with a chap called Dave Groh, who I now tell people I call him the engine doctor, who lived in Madison, Michigan, and asked him about the engine, and he agreed to take a look at it. So now the next adventure has to start. So the flying adventure sort of stopped there in South Dakota. Janine and I were heartbroken about it. We did go on to Brainerd the next day, still wondering what the heck we were going to do. And then it was while we were in Brainerd, we said, okay, we've got to take this one by the horns. Keith, biplane Keith, agreed to come and help take the engine off the aeroplane. And so he flew back from Brainerd to Watertown. Janine and I rented a car, drove back there, and the next day we took the engine off, went and hired a Penske truck, and started our second adventure, which was a road adventure for 1,000 miles from Watertown, South Dakota to Madison, Michigan. It's just north of Lansing. So I've never driven that far before. It's about a 16-hour car journey, and it was just, again, incredible to drive through Minnesota and Wisconsin, go around the big lake and get up into Michigan. One of the funny things was I got onto Sirius. I pulled out of Watertown Airport. I got onto the freeway, and I say, Siri, directions to Madison, Michigan from current position. And she comes back and says, stay on this road for 361 miles and stay right. And I just made me laugh all the way there. 200 miles of one of the roads was absolutely straight as a die. So we did a road trip. We got to Michigan and then realized, okay, well, we're not going to be able to go to Oshkosh now. So I phoned a friend and said, okay, cancel those hotel rooms because we're not going to be going to Oshkosh. And we're going to stay here in Michigan and most likely fly back to California while they finish working on the engine. And then after 24 hours there in Michigan, we said, you know what, well, this Oshkosh is just really across the lake. Maybe we should go. So all the other members of the tour, in all fairness, were getting, texting and saying, oh, come on, you gotta come to Oshkosh. You got to be at Oshkosh. And Janine and I, we had wanted to fly into Oshkosh. This was one of the big things we wanted to do. And the rest of the tour was due to fly in on the Sunday. It was the 21st, I think it was, of July. So we said to ourselves, okay, we'll go. We'll drive there. We'll drive from Lansing, and we will drive round and go up to Oshkosh. Then I thought, okay, I cancelled the hotel rooms, which I'd booked 6 months previous. So I spent the next morning on the phone. Hello, silliest question of the week. Would you happen to have a room? No. I did this for about half a dozen different hotels from phoning them. Any chance of a room for the week of Oshkosh? No. And then I said, yes, but it's $1,000 a night. And silly things like that. So if we were going to go, we were going to have to go on the Saturday morning. The rest of the tour were planning to land in there on the Sunday morning. We wanted to be there. So on the Saturday morning, I thought, one more time, I'm not going to drive all the way to Oshkosh and not know I've got anywhere to stay. Oh, I should tell you that I did use, in the airplane, originally we had camping equipment, but when we ended up in Watertown and not moving on, we decided to ship everything that we didn't need to carry with us because we weren't sure quite what was going to happen to us. Ship it back to California thanks to FedEx. So the camping gear went. So we didn't even have a tent with us now. So I get on the phone first thing on that Saturday morning. Okay, if we're going to go, we're going to drive to Oshkosh. And I'm Googling up hotels that I haven't called, and there is one I spot. This hotel, it says Super 8 Motel, Oshkosh Airport. I'd not seen this before. It hadn't come up on a previous search. But it's a Super 8 Motel. I thought, okay. And nothing by chance. So I phone them up, and the voice on the end of the phone says, hi, this is the Super 8 Motel, Oshkosh Airport. This is Larry speaking, and how may I help you today? And I said, I got the craziest question of the day. And he said, oh, I know what that is. Have I got a room? And I said, that would be the question of the day. Do you have a room? Larry said, yes, I do. And he did have a room, and it was at a very good price. And so I booked us in there for for the week, and we set out. And as we finally get close to Oshkosh Airport, I'm looking and I see a sign that says Super 8 Motel. Oh, crikey. Wow. It's on the airport. It's right there. And so we go in from our bedroom window. We're looking at the threshold for 09. And I'm not 20 yards to the fence, and there's a gate in the fence, an official gate into the fence, and you're on the airport. So we had a good night's sleep that night. On Sunday morning, we get up and go to sit on the flight line. And finally, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, here come 11 travelers, all in nice formation, and they land and they pull up. Everybody's pleased to see us. It was great to see them, but they were pleased to see us that we finally made it. And then they said, "Oh, but where are you staying? You sent your tents on, so where are you staying?" And I was able to point across and say, "Right here on the airport." And so there was some remarks made about that, but nothing by chance. I got that room that morning, and we had a great week at Oshkosh, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. We decided to leave Oshkosh, though, on the Wednesday, and we flew back to California because the engine that Dave Grove was working on was going to take 3 weeks. And so we came home, and then we airlined back out there. We airlined back out, the two of us, Janine and I, and then we hired another Penske truck, and then we drove that 1,000 miles back to Watertown, South Dakota, and then we put the engine back on the airplane. And then I was looking at the weather, and the weather wasn't absolutely brilliant for coming back, and we wanted to get the airplane back to California as quickly as we could. So Janine agreed to jump on Cal Pacific, which was running at the time a leg from Watertown, South Dakota to Denver. Yes, Cal Pacific, the same airline that's going to be here. And so she took that and she flew back to California. And then Pedro Langton, who was one of the guys that we'd flown out with and who was on the tour, and Pedro had competed in, and he actually won the Crete to the Cape rally that went from Crete to south of, to the Cape in Africa and back again the previous year. He agreed to come with me, and so the two of us could fly back, so we could piggyback at each other. But we got as far as Beatrice coming back, Nebraska, and when the storm started hitting us, and we got stuck there for a couple of days. And then we spent the rest of the time dodging storms all the way back down through Kansas and parts of Texas. And what he did is Pedro got out the old consolidated airmail charts, and so we picked up a couple of routes, Cam 11, which goes down to Fort Worth, and then picked up Cam 4 to come across. And Cam 4 goes to LA. We dropped off it at Phoenix, and then flew back to San Diego from there. So that made that journey home sort of quite historic for us. So it took us 6 days to get back because of the weather. We even with two of us flying, we weren't able to fly much more than 4 or 5 hours a day, even with two of us. So that was it. We returned home here on the 27th of August, and so that was 2018, the summer of which we spent barnstorming in the Midwest, and got back, and I'm still walking around now fully understanding a bit more about the expression of nothing by chance. So nothing by chance. You need a hanger. You're in a thunderstorm and there's no hangers, and somebody that you've never met turns up in a truck and gives you his hanger for the night and feeds you and sleeps you. And then nothing by chance, and you can't get some fuel, and somebody comes along and not only gets you fuel, but knows the manager of the airport that you're flying to and gets him to stay way beyond his time and wait for us to land early evening. And then nothing by chance you decide to do an oil change when it's not needed, but you did it anyway. And nothing by chance. You didn't have a hotel room for Oshkosh, and you phoned and you got a hotel. So that's the message that I learned through this. That was my take home, was that nothing by chance works.